Having been buried in the churchyard, the ghost rides forth to the scene of battle in nightly quest of his head, and that the rushing speed with which he sometimes passes along the hollow in a hurry to get back to the churchyard before daybreak.
I love that. Who wrote that?
Oh, you've never heard of Diedrich Knickerbocker?
No.
How about Jonathan Oldstyle?
No.
Will Wizard?
Nope.
Well, guys, it's all Washington Irving.
Well, I guess today we're going to be unfolding the story of Washington Irving and the legend of Sleepy Hollow.
This week on Folktown, Sleepy Hollow, a town that's anything but sleepy. Welcome to Folktown.
Welcome back, residents of Folktown. We have reached the end of Chapter 1, Sleepy Hollow. Isn't that crazy?
It's wild.
I don't want to talk about it.
So, this is the big kahuna, as they say. This is the one we've been waiting for. This is actually the story and the reason that we did this podcast. And it is the legend of the Headless Horseman and where it comes from and different iterations. But before we dive into that, we just want to say thank you. Right, ladies? This was a lot of learning, a labor of love for us. We were all really excited to do this. And for the first time, we're all sitting in the same room.
Woo!
Wait, not the first time in life.
Yes.
But the first time recording.
Yeah.
So we are coming to you live from Studio 7, Gotham West. First time that I've been here. And if you can hear the excitement, it's probably because I'm just so happy to be here with everybody. But we are going to talk a little bit today about the Headless Horseman, and we're going to dive into the man behind the myth, the legend, the beautiful story that is the legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Mm-hmm.
But stuff that we, in our research, did not know before. I did not know that, Washington Irving, who wrote the legend of Sleepy Hollow, I did not know that all of these stories that existed in mythology were out there. All these Headless Horseman iterations throughout the world.
Well,
So
I
true.
think there's that thing that all artists have, right? We all adapt our art based on life, and anything can influence anybody,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
That's so true.
Absolutely. And we will be diving into a lot about Washington Irving and his life and all of the characters and the real people that influence those characters. But first, we kind of want to talk about the different stories. I mean, I'll kick it off to you, Deena. No stress. You're going to be telling us the Scottish version.
I'm going to be telling you like a minute of the Scottish
that's
version.
That's fine.
Because I think the real thing, which is why we want to start with the folklore, is because it's so steeped in culture, right? You
Yes.
have Irish folklore, Scottish, German, Native Americans have their own. And we all know that these stories are fictitious, if you will, but so much of their cultures and traditions are involved in this. And that's why people get so into it, I think. And America is such a hodgepodge, like meshing of all of these cultures, that I think that's why after 200 plus years, we're still telling this story, because we've discovered, it's considered one of the original ghost stories / American folktales that really kind of started our country off.
And insanely enough, right by where we grew up. Again, so this is kind of where all of our interest into this season of Folktown started, and many more towns and many more spooky stories to come. But with all the different versions that we looked into, I think there's something really beautiful about the fact that over hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years, these stories can evolve into a story that we read in school in New York State. Like I was saying, in the school district I went to, it's required reading for 7th grade, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So we all know it. And then we go take the field trip. So
I can't imagine how you would go. I know you didn't attend, but there is a Washington Irving Middle School in Tarrytown. How do you attend that school and then you don't read the story, right? I mean, it's embedded in curriculum.
Don't know the history. Yeah.
Okay, so dive in. Tell us a little bit.
So, I feel like it's almost like which came first, the chicken or the egg here, like which one of these stories really kind of started it all, but it kind of evolves and I don't know. There's just all this like backstory, origin stories we were calling it. So the Scots tale of the Headless Horseman concerns a man named Ewan who was decapitated in a clan battle at Glen Kinnear on the Isle of Mull. And he died in battle. And that to me immediately set off that light bulb. And I was like, the Hessian, you know, like that must have been him, you know. And that's pretty much the whole story because it wasn't just so much about somebody coming back to haunt. It was about the killing of this person who lost his head.
Yeah. And wasn't there a bit that like he was super pissed that they wouldn't make him a chieftain or something? What did
the battle denied him any chance to be a chieftain
because he got killed dead?
Yeah. I mean,
He died.
so close.
Poor guy.
So close.
That and like you just said, that is hello. Ringing that bell.
And do you know his horse was headless too?
Oh, wait.
Poor horses during this time.
Hold
you know?
on. That means the poor horsey's head got cut off?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or blown off.
I hate that.
Yeah, I know.
I hate that.
Yeah.
That's a rough one.
Yep.
That was really rough.
Welcome, everyone.
So mine is based in German folklore. And the reason I'm going next because Dayelle is going to share the Irish version, and it is so damn creepy that it's so creepy.
Yeah.
So mine is based on the German folklore that in Germany, a headless horseman, these stories mostly came from the Rhineland rather than using the decapitation. The headless horsemen killed their victims simply by touching them. So apparently these headless horsemen, they were revenants who had to wander the earth until they atoned for all of their sins. So sometimes they would do a good deed for strangers, and instead of showing their gratitude by shaking their hands, the stranger and the horseman would hold a tree branch between them, and then the branch would wither and die rather than the stranger dying. And that's eventually, as revenants, how they would get back into the good graces and then be able to pass into the afterlife.
For those of you that don't know, a revenant is an animated corpse. So we had zombies too.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Excellent.
I mean, again, like maybe this could have been an inspiration for a zombie story, right? A reanimated corpse.
Absolutely. And so they say that Irving, we're going to go ahead and we already can debunk the fact that this was an incorrect year of when they say he traveled to Germany, but that he had traveled to Germany and become quite familiar with the Dutch and German folklore, in particular, the last of the Legend von Rubsal, the Legends of Rubsal from Johann Carl August Muskus's literary tellings, German folktales. I'm doing my best with the German here, guys. It's said to have inspired the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And again, no way to prove this, but just some of those similarities there in the story. The Revenant thing is a little but, you know, the Headless Horseman is said to ride every Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of dig that vibe that he can kill you just by touching you. It has that bridge to maybe the Headless Horseman was a character to resemble death.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Which ties into
Boom, boom, boom.
Dale's
Segue.
creepy story.
So my story is the Irish legend of the Dallahan, and I'm probably not pronouncing that right, so just bear with me. But this is super fascinating because it's a really eerie, creepy, and it's deeply rooted in the Celtic mythology. So it's said to originate from a Celtic god, Crom Da, which, again, I'm probably not pronouncing that right, so I apologize.
You really should brush up on your Gaelic before we hit record.
But this guy was this god was described as a dark, bent man who would ask for human sacrifices. And he also was the fertility god, which is quite interesting. So
Well, that's an interesting pairing.
yeah. Yeah, like a very, okay.
Take one
great.
out, put one in.
Mm-hmm. Like, okay, I guess that works. But the Dallahan is supposed to be based on this godlike character. But this guy is the Irish version of the Horseman. And in this version, it is him riding through the night, as most of the horsemen do. They ride through the night. He holds his head on his shoulder, but correction. He does not have his head on his shoulders. He holds his head up very, very, very high. And it's said that the head is a decaying, severed head.
Delicious.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also another little tidbit that I found super creepy and gross, that he also wields a whip made from a human corpse's spine.
I think you should have just cut straight to that.
Yeah. Can you imagine coming across this Headless Horseman, this variation of him? But then it gets even crazier because he's also depicted as riding in a black carriage or coach that is pulled by 6 black horses. And the carriage is often described as being made of dark materials and human bones.
Fantastic.
And the carriage is supposed to be the symbol of death. So he is kind of death, right? And it's said that when the Dullahan stops riding, a death occurs. And he calls out a name, and at which point that person's name, whoever it might be, immediately dies. That's
okay.
Great. So that's where that story
You win creepiest story.
goes. Yeah.
And I think that's the point, right? We hear a creepy story like this. I mean, we really could have just like cut right to like, this guy's got a whip that's made of somebody's spine.
Mm-hmm.
He says your name.
You're dead.
And you're dead.
Mm-hmm. Again, you don't have to.
As a child who would hear a story like that, that would be terrifying. And I think that's the thing. These are the things that stick with us into adulthood. And that's how we love kind of piecing the puzzles of folklore and different cultures together.
And there were so many others, by the way. I don't know if anyone, for the listeners, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, start researching because there was...
it's a rabbit hole.
It is intense, the amount of Headless Horseman stories that exist out there in different cultures. And I always find that interesting because if every culture has a version, maybe there's that kernel of truth somewhere, right? So if every culture across many centuries, different parts of the world where they didn't have ways to tell each other the stories, it's not like they could look it up on the internet. It's not like they could read it in a book. These pieces of literature, this information was not being not crossing oceans to other folks. How is everybody during very similar time periods creating these Headless Horseman stories?
So true. It makes me think of I don't know if you guys ever did this as kids, but when you had the game of telephone where you had the 2 cups and as the story goes down the line, it changes. Or when I know in school we had the teacher would tell you one thing at the front of the line. And as the story went down the line, it would change drastically.
Exactly.
They would have maybe 1 or 2 little tidbits that were the same. But by the time it got to the end, it was a completely different story. But it all originated with one story.
Because we had oral tradition, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
obviously that is an epic game of telephone until people started writing things down and publishing them for everybody to be able to read in languages that everybody was able to read, not just Latin.
Exactly. That language barrier. Yeah.
There's also, there's I don't know, maybe a selfishness that, we've been blessed in the U.S. with this, version of the Headless Horseman. We've all grown up with it, but there are parts of culture. My dad grew up. My grandmother was, I think everyone had this shock and realization when they got 23andMe tests that we are not Native American. So much so we thought we were Native American that my cousins had tribal cards because one of our great grandmothers was in a Native American Cherokee tribe, all this kind of stuff, right? So then you get your DNA. You're not. But because that was such an important thing, my mom would bring us to powwow ceremonies to teach us about our culture. And the beauty of sitting down and having a stranger tell you a story about your people and your culture.
Stories.
And even it had nothing to do with me, but it just felt like I was part of something that was part of me. And I think that, like you brought up, that's a really beautiful tradition of oral tradition and telling stories. And the Headless Horseman, I think, is ours.
Without a doubt.
In the U.S. That is our every Halloween, to watch out for the Headless Horseman.
Yep.
It's part of our culture, and not just here in New York. I would
Everywhere.
imagine, I'm also, that's conjecture because I've never lived anywhere other than New York. But I would imagine that's a story that everybody thinks of on Halloween, right?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. And, a legend is just that. It's based on history and people think it's real. There's no way to prove it.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And that's what
the
makes
fun
it fun.
part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's why we're here.
I just realized something. It's Halloween, guys.
Yeah, it is.
Happy Halloween.
Best day of the year, best holiday of the year, in my opinion, because you get to celebrate it without having to give people presents,
Just candy.
Yeah, but my love
Fave.
language is
Spooky stories. Speaking of spooky stories,
perfect segue because we're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we are going to tell you the legend of the Headless Horseman. Welcome back, dear listeners. So we are almost to our favorite part of the episode, like I said before, which is the story. But I did just want to talk a little bit more on the Headless Horseman, and we're not going to talk about the Sleepy Hollow movie because the inaccuracies in that movie to this story are abundant. I did not rewatch it specifically because I did not want to be tainted and say something that was not factual in this episode. Deena, I know you did.
I tried because I watched it when it originally came out, and I really did like it. I did, because it's just another version of the story, and I love adaptations.
Yeah.
Tim Burton's great, and Johnny Depp again. But yeah, that I watched it the other night after now having been so engulfed in all of this and gone down that rabbit hole, and now I can't enjoy it because I'm like, that's not what the church looks like. That's not what the town. Nope. He was a teacher. He was not a consul. What is happening?
he strayed too far.
But he did and he didn't. He created his own version
creative.
of, right? And
Yeah.
Christopher Walken was such a great Hessian, like that he was creepy with those shaved down teeth. Like, come on. But people who are watching that thinking they know the legend of Sleepy Hollow, you don't. You just know the Tim Burton version of Sleepy Hollow, which plays fast and loose.
Now, I didn't watch it, but Dayelle, didn't you watch the Sleepy Hollow show?
Yeah.
Okay, and where are we at?
No, it's
accuracy
totally
land?
no.
Where thank you, one listener told us it was from Wilmington, North Carolina.
Filmed
That
in.
is awesome.
Filmed in. Yeah.
Filmed in, yes.
But it's supposed to take place in the actual Sleepy Hollow, New York, which makes it even more interesting. But it's nothing like the legend of Sleepy Hollow, the story. They took a very creative direction for it. I love the guy who plays Ichabod, but it's not at all. It's a lot more about the world ending and there being, there's 4 horsemen that are coming, and that
it's like
brings
the
about
apocalypse.
yes, exactly. It's the start of the apocalypse.
Interesting.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So just another variation, but
So is that horseman then that is after Ichabod one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse? Is that a tie?
yes.
That's clever.
That's kind of, I like that.
Yeah,
I
I liked the show. I like the show. I think, though, if you're looking for something that is the story, the main story, that's not the show, Sleepy Hollow.
Okay. All right. Well, we have two no's on the accuracy there, but I will say I did enjoy the movie when I watched it. And
Entertaining.
Yeah, very entertaining. And there's nothing wrong with taking creative liberties and going your own direction, but that's not what we did today.
And how would Irving had made his legend if he didn't technically do the same thing?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Boom.
So he pulled from, like we said, all of these different folklore versions from all over the world and created his own, the one that we know and love. So cozy up, dear listener, because now we will be telling you the legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Welcome, dear listeners, to a chilling tale of the supernatural that has haunted the quiet village of Sleepy Hollow for generations. This is the legend of the Headless Horseman and the hapless schoolteacher, Ichabod Crane. In the early 19th century, Sleepy Hollow was a place where time seemed to stand still. Nestled in the Hudson Valley, the town was known for its tranquil beauty and, of course, its legends. Our story begins on a crisp autumn evening, as the leaves fell from the trees and the town prepared for the annual harvest festival. Among the villagers was Ichabod Crane, a tall, lanky schoolteacher with a penchant for fanciful tales and an insatiable appetite. Ichabod's days were filled with lessons and laughter, as he regaled his students with stories of ghosts, goblins, and the legend of the Headless Horseman. One evening, as Ichabod made his way home on his horse from a particularly raucous gathering, he found himself on a desolate path, surrounded by the eerie quiet of the forest. And then, out of the shadows, emerged a figure on horseback, its head severed from its shoulders. The Headless Horseman, a phantom said to be the spirit of a Hessian soldier who had lost his head to a cannonball during the Revolutionary War. Panic surged through Ichabod as he urged his horse to move faster. But the Headless Horseman pursued him relentlessly, his ghastly laughter echoing through the night. Ichabod knew that he had to reach the safety of the bridge that crossed the nearby creek. For it was said that the Headless Horseman could not cross running water. But just as Ichabod reached the bridge, the Headless Horseman threw his severed head, a flaming pumpkin, at the terrified schoolteacher. The next morning, all that remained of Ichabod Crane were his abandoned horse and a shattered pumpkin. Some said he'd been spirited away by the ghostly rider, while others believed he'd fled in terror. To this day, the legend of the Headless Horseman haunts Sleepy Hollow, and the townsfolk still share the tale of Ichabod Crane and the ghostly rider who roams the woods in search of a head. And so, dear listeners, as the moon rises over Sleepy Hollow, remember the cautionary tale of Ichabod Crane and the Headless Horseman. For in this quiet village, where legends come to life, the line between reality and the supernatural is as thin as the mist that hangs in the autumn air. Sleep well, and beware the headless spectre that rides through the night.
Okay, so that is the legend of Sleepy Hollow.
The real one.
The real one. Written by
Washington Irving, the native son of New York.
What a title, right?
I mean, big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
Big shoes to fill. But I think we probably had the most fun talking about how he has a hand in so much of today's pop culture, and so many of us know nothing but about it. Like being tied back to him, we're like, how is this Irving as well? Like the name Gotham.
I love that.
Yes, it's such a fun story. Like he didn't invent the word Gotham. It, again, originated somewhere else. There was some sort of story about the small village where the king was supposedly going to pass through and they didn't want him to. So they all decided to act crazy in hopes he would just pass them by, and he did. So Gotham is actually implying that, you know, the people who live there are crazy.
Oh, welcome to New York.
And then when
when
he came out with his first book, he nicknamed Gotham for New York City, and I guess everything kind of went from there. But seriously, how would you equate Washington Irving with Gotham? I never would have thought of that before.
Never.
Reading that.
I didn't know that until I started a podcast here a couple of years ago with Gotham West Studios, if you guys didn't know. And you told me that story.
When we first started talking about this, I was like, I'm about to blow your mind. Guess what? And she was like, oh my God, Tom is going to love that.
Fantastic.
Another fun fact. Did you guys know the earth was flat?
Oh, yes, I heard this. Yes.
Yeah, Irving, again, one of his books, very satirical, introduced, and it is quoted, the erroneous idea that Europeans believed the world was flat prior to the discovery of the New World by Christopher Columbus. And again, people just really believed him, that they were like, oh, okay, the world is flat. Okay.
Great. Perfect.
That one's really fun.
I like that one.
I love that one. Especially since 200 plus years later, people are still believing it's true.
Yeah. We won't talk about that. But yes, people do believe that's true.
And, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that he started public libraries, right? The Astor Free public libraries in New York. Hashtag thank a teacher,
Yeah. So, what, I know that you know a lot more about this than Dayelle and I do, but who were the people in his life that influenced these characters?
Oh, yeah, man. I was just going to say that.
I'm
where
really
did they
interested
come
in that.
from?
We might need more time. So, okay, take the journey back with me, right? So Irving's born in New York, but gets shipped up to Tarrytown to stay with close personal friends during this yellow fever outbreak in 1798, right? Because he didn't have the best of health as a child. His parents were very concerned for him because he was the youngest of 11, 8 of whom survived to adulthood. So they've already lost children, possibly at this point. So they let him stay with his friend, James Kirk Paulding, who also became a writer. And I also love the fact that it's all these little boys who are loving all of these legends that they're hearing. They're obsessed with the Hudson Valley and the beauty that is it, the nature of it. And this is the Romantic period of writing, right? And it's in stark contrast to what's going on in the literary world in England. And I think Irving was smart enough to play up and kind of develop that because of all the influences around him. So in his first book, The History of New York, he writes it under a pseudonym. Did you know what that was?
No.
Nope.
Diedrich Knickerbocker.
Haha.
Well,
there's that name.
There it is.
We have an amazing basketball team that is really living up to this legend, this legendary title.
Maybe when we were kids.
Yeah.
Not so much recently.
But, technically we are all Knickerbockers because we are all New Yorkers. But in terms of his characters, when we're talking about the legend, again, influences, fiction is influenced by reality, right? So War of 1812, everybody wants to begin with that, but we could work back further. There really is a Colonel Ichabod B. Crane.
Yes. I found that story when I was doing the research.
Did you see his picture?
Yes. Who is this man?
What did you think of his picture?
I thought, it was good.
I thought he looked very angry.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
He did not want his picture taken.
No. No.
Now, there's no documentation that the two of them ever met.
Yeah.
But they were stationed in the area. There is definite possibility that he at least heard the name. The name Ichabod is very...
That's unique.
Unique. That's the word. Yep.
So, that's not a family name. That's not like, this is Ichabod Jr., Ichabod Sr. That's not a popular name.
I would think, unless maybe back in the time it was, but you don't
That's too coincidental.
Yeah, no, you can't find anybody with that name except for this other person.
And that's, I had originally heard that they had met and he didn't like the Colonel. And that's why he had based the character on him and kind of poked fun at him. But I actually don't think that's true because in terms of just physical characteristics, they don't look anything alike.
Not even a little bit.
No. And I did read somewhere, and again, it has contrasting views. Some people said he loved the fact that everybody knew his name, but I read a lot that he hated the fact that Irving used his name, and that just makes it so funny.
Man,
to me.
That's good. That's good if you hate someone.
Yeah.
That's good.
People come up to you and they ask you if you're the Ichabod from the story.
Imagine you're like, no.
Stop it. I'm not that guy.
That's so funny.
Yeah, I have it written down that there can be little doubt he provided the writer with an irresistible moniker, and even less doubt that Halloween wasn't exactly his favorite time of year. And I just was like, yeah, this sounds like Irving, because he was quite the prankster. And, that's another thing in folktales that they have in common is there usually is a prankster. And that really is a great segue to the Brom Bones character.
I was going to say, I was like, Brom was a trickster. So
He
that's
was.
like
He was
perfect.
a little prank master.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were kind of debating before, who did kill Ichabod Crane? Or did he in fact die at the end, right? They leave it very ambiguous at the end.
Yeah.
Some people say he met a fate worse than death,
Yeah.
which was becoming a lawyer.
Yeah.
Which Washington Irving in real life was a lawyer, but didn't like doing it. I mean,
Yeah.
self-proclaimed bad at it, barely even passed the bar.
And there were I've read stories that he was cited upstate New York, which is pretty fun because we actually talked about this in one of our little meetings today, that there's an Ichabod Crane school in upstate New York, in Kinderhook, New York, where people get really mad because there could be one snowflake, a very small dusting, and they will close school. And if you live in the Northeast, it takes quite a bit of snow to close school. And this school's renowned for being like, one snowflake, we're done. We're closing school.
Except in New York City, where it's not an option.
No.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry
No
for New York
snow
City
days.
Yeah.
teachers.
But this real life character, his name is Abraham Martling, who is buried at the Old Dutch Church in their burying ground. His nickname was Brom.
Really?
That's crazy.
And I don't think that Irving had any vendetta against him. I think, again, like maybe physical characteristics and his mannerisms, like he was a blacksmith. He had a very big black horse that he rode. I mean, we've all seen someone where we're like, ooh, that could be a main character.
Yeah.
Of the story,
Oh,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Like maybe he just had that look.
inspiration
Main
to a character.
energy.
Yeah.
And Irving really has this love triangle, right? Between him, Brom, and Katrina Van Tassel, where the Van Tassels are a very big staple in the Sleepy Hollow community. They were absolutely real. They are buried at the Old Dutch Church as well. Could that character have been based on Katrina herself? Some people say yes. Some people say it was her niece, Eleanor, like Eleanor's personality, but he had used Katrina's name. Why? I don't know.
I feel like Katrina's on the opposite side of like Ichabod. Katrina is a very popular name from that time. Like I feel like there's a lot of Katrinas. So it could have just been he liked that name.
Well, I
It's a
think
hot
the
girl
name,
I mean, right? Yeah.
I think the name was with a C and it was Katarina. But
still.
yeah, like, I mean,
still.
close
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And, the Van Tassels are still very much a staple in the community as well.
Yeah.
Now, didn't you say that there was a tie to him with our Hold of the Witch story?
Yes. Which, and I think that was always our essential goal, right? We
Yeah.
are making 4 episodes on the town of Sleepy Hollow, and all of these legends and lores all kind of tie together or stemmed from each other, right? And yeah, in the story itself, what's his name? Sorry. Irving. Yeah, him.
The main guy.
Who are we talking about?
This guy.
Right at the beginning, I want to say it's on maybe like the second or third page, depending on which version you're looking at. It says a drowsy, dreamy influence seems to hang over the land and to pervade the very atmosphere. Some say that the place was bewitched by a high German doctor during the early days of the settlement.
That's incredible. I love that.
I do too, because I think it's also, Irving wasn't one, and I think this was a very Dutch thing to do, even though Irving was not Dutch, but in terms of tying it to the original settlers.
Yeah.
I had mentioned it during The Witches that they didn't want to get involved,
Yes.
right? They didn't do anything, horrible to these people or any, that we know of, maybe, but they also didn't do anything to stop persecution or anything. And I think Irving, from certain, if we really wanted to spiral down that, he was kind of like that too. He was kind of like, well, I'm just going to get back on my sloop and see y'all later.
Yeah. watch
Thanks
from
for
a
the
distance.
idea.
Yeah.
Thanks for the idea.
I feel like that's pretty common with writers from that time period. They were the lurkers on the outside looking in, kind of not really related to this story, but you had told me a fun fact about Edgar Allan Poe and Washington Irving that I loved. If you could share that one.
Well, I always say he was like a Kardashian of his time. You know, people knew him after the legend came out in 1820 here in the States, because it came out first in England where he was living at the time. And it was unheard of for especially an American writer to have such success in both the States and overseas. So he was a big deal.
Yeah.
People wanted to know him. And Edgar Allan Poe was one of them. He was coming up in this time. He was a struggling writer at this time. And it has been said that he sent some of his writing to Irving, including The Fall of the House of Usher, to get his feedback on.
That's wild.
That's incredible. And if you have not watched that show on Netflix, highly recommend it.
But what's a little salty was I don't know what happened with that. Maybe Irving didn't get the mail, or something he didn't like it. Maybe he gave him some harsh feedback.
Okay.
Because later on, Poe becomes one of Irving's critics.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a little salty.
But can you imagine back in that time period, like having so many writers, like the competition to make a book that is as big as Washington Irving's was, like that had to be huge, just based on the fact that he was as popular as he was. Then to have another writer who is also a very good writer, like that. I mean, I can only imagine what that competition felt like. And I'm sure there was a lot of like cutthroat, because during that time, there wasn't like all these publishing houses and places to get your book out. So like,
you become a critic of the person you're trying to bring down. It's almost like that old adage that, the people that are putting you down are usually the ones that you're in greatest competition with, right? The ones that don't want to see you win. I'm sure Poe thought, let me knock this guy down a couple notches to then elevate myself.
I mean, exactly. And like, this is all totally
this
speculation,
is conjecture.
but like, I can only imagine, especially for that time. Like, it makes sense. It makes sense.
Now, he did not marry, right, Deena?
No, he didn't. And he did not father any children. So anything that we really could have found out probably didn't get passed down, or it might have gotten passed down to his nephew, who did publish a book of their letters and correspondence, which I think a lot of people, historians and so on, have gotten as much as they can from those letters. But again, isn't that interpretive, right?
Yeah.
It's this information is never going to be confirmed.
Yeah.
But that love story,
and I think it ties into it.
Yeah,
too.
it feels like it was written by somebody who lost a great love.
Yeah.
So
Something that was unattainable.
Yeah.
And that is the embodiment of the Katrina
Yes.
character, right? Because she does marry Brom Bone in the end. She does not pick Ichabod Crane. And I feel like with our legend that we went to watch, Jonathan Crook, hey-yo, he implies, that Ichabod had written her a poem or a letter of some kind and presented it to her at their party. And she could have possibly rejected him. So,
Yeah. It seems like she just kind of brushed it aside. Like, okay.
Oh, you're cute.
Yeah, that's cute.
Yeah.
But
She friend
look at
zoned him.
Rom.
You know
He
what?
is.
I think it was a friend zone situation because he was teaching her to sing. That he was a teacher, so he was kind of like creepily courting her under that guy's like.
Well, that doesn't seem great.
But
No.
but she wasn't this young underage girl.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Disclaimer. No,
I like that.
Yes. But yes, Irving's real life love was such a sad story. And unfortunately, I don't have a lot of details about it, but he was working for a Judge Josiah Hoffman in the city after he passed his bar. And he had a daughter named Matilda that, if you read any of the things that Irving wrote about her, it's exactly what you would want somebody to say. He at one point says how much he idolized her. And then, of course, in 1809, while he's writing his first book, his first attempt at this, she catches a cold that winds up being tuberculosis or consumption at this time, right? And passes away.
That's so sad.
So he had his one great love.
Yeah.
It really seemed like he did. And she's not buried at the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery with him. I'm assuming it's because they lived in New York City that she's buried in the Bowery, supposedly, and St. Mark's. Where some other big names are, I've come to learn. But I don't even think like my fun fact really is about that. It's about the fact that I never really thought, I was like, oh, okay, so his heart was broken. He never marries. He never has kids. That doesn't mean he didn't date, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Very true.
Right?
Very true.
It's true.
And did you read who had the hots for him, apparently?
No.
No, I want to know. Deets.
Mary Shelley,
Oh.
Frankenstein writer.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Again with the writers.
I mean, they probably all flocked together.
I was just going to say, they probably all hung out together.
So this is television and movie, and I read so much that sometimes these stories just kind of all meld together. But from what I remember during my brief obsession with American literature and English literature, they would frequent the same pubs, and they were known as writers' pubs. And it was kind of like you went in there, you sat in your dark corner with your candlelight, you drank your ales and your, unless you were Edgar Allan Poe and you were chugging Jack Daniels in the mean streets of Baltimore, but you drank in the same, as they used to call, the haunt, right? That's where the local haunt, where the writers would go and they would all hang out together. So, I mean, that to me is, they were probably there at the same time. Maybe she also had a great love. I don't know her story, so I can't speak on it. But if she had a great love that she lost, maybe he was her great love. And
it's very possible.
And he was like, had mine. Thanks. My new love is literature. Bye.
Yeah, I had read, I should say, that, he did fall for someone else who had rejected him.
Oh.
And I think Mary Shelley was afterwards and he rejected her. And I'm just like, all right.
Yeah.
Keep it real, people.
People just throwing it
But you know what,
everywhere.
though? Everybody was on a clock back then, so.
It's true.
That's very true. You weren't living till 80.
You catch a cold. Bye.
Bye.
And ironically, he did not live to 80.
Yeah.
So tell us, how old was he when he did die?
I believe he was 76. So that kind of brings us back to the cemetery, to tie it all kind of back to that and how Sleepy Hollow became Sleepy Hollow and why. Because I think when people first find out it's a real place, they equate it to the story and they want to go check it out and stuff. And this little town, this little hamlet, right, really does owe a lot to this story because General Motors was the big employment spot, during the 90s in this area. And they decided to close down that location and move to someplace cheaper. And it put about 4,000 people out of a job. So in order to kind of revive this town and generate that economy again, they decided to rebrand North Tarrytown Sleepy Hollow at the end of 96, beginning of 97.
Just crazy.
Is pretty genius, though.
It is. Marketing.
I think so too. I think a lot of the locals, and just because this is Halloween and obviously their peak of season.
Absolutely.
And it is insane there. Like the traffic is wild, which obviously puts everybody in a bad mood. There's block parties. There's hate. They do it up. Now we talked about the witches on the paddleboard, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the whole month they just pack it. So those poor locals, that are just trying to like hit up CVS and they got no parking. You know, it takes an hour South Broadway is so congested. So you can imagine that some people are thankful for it, but probably are like, can't wait till October's over.
Yeah, I understand that. And I'm sure that's how the same in Salem.
Oh,
I'm sure
yeah.
Salem
I was just
feels
going
the
to say
same
that.
way.
I was like, I can't believe how many videos I've seen where people are like, don't come to Salem in October. You won't be able to move. And it's true.
It's true. I've seen the videos. I've seen the TikToks.
Yeah.
So what is, as someone who's studied Washington Irving and you're really, I would say that you're definitely a student of Washington Irving as someone who knows you.
I think we could have been best friends.
I do think so as well. But like, what is your favorite thing about him? especially with the story and his life. And like, he really has had such an impact on American culture, but also New York culture.
Mm-hmm.
That is actually a wonderful question. And what you just said, like, it just popped it right into my head. He, to me, is so funny. Okay, just the pseudonyms, the pen names that he chose to use. You know, if you think back to when he first started writing, he was writing essays for the Morning Chronicle, whom his older brother was an editor, got him the job, right? And he's putting out these essays in the paper that probably weren't even that long, probably like got paid, what, pennies, you know? Like,
yeah.
And he decides to write them under Jonathan Oldstyle. And the name's just, I have no idea what the meaning of is behind the name, but it's funny to me. Like, Oldstyle. Like, where did you come up with that? What, you know? And then he has the Diedrich Knickerbocker name. But he also used in other things, Will Wizard, Langston Langstaff, you know? And he had this group.
He really likes alliteration.
Yeah.
As do I.
Yeah.
I mean, it really does work. It makes it rolls off the tongue. But they had a group, one of his brothers, James Kirkpauding as well, where they called themselves the Lads of Kilkenny. And they were huge pranksters. In fact, you know I've referenced this book multiple times by Jonathan Crook, but that's where I first heard the story. And I have not been able to find it anywhere else, where they were out one night just in the area. And there was a guard posted up because they just kind of like kept watch. And they tied a rope around the guard's post and like dragged him by horse like through like really messed with people. And I'm just like, these crazy kids.
Yeah.
Know? And then with Diedrich Knickerbocker, I always joke, like, he created viral marketing 200 plus years before there were like viral marketing was a thing. Mm-hmm. So when this book comes out, and again, remember, his fiance has now just passed, okay? It's almost happening all simultaneously. The book is about to come out at the beginning of December. He starts placing missing person ads in the newspaper saying that this old, crusty historian was staying in a hotel. His name was Diedrich Knickerbocker, and he's gone missing. Has anybody seen him? But then places another ad in another paper responding to the ad, like, oh, I think I saw that guy like wandering around, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then the hotel allegedly posts one saying he's disappeared and hasn't paid his bill. And if he doesn't come back, they're going to publish his manuscript and keep the proceeds. And I mean, we all love our gossip. Can you imagine reading this? Being like, this is hysterical. What is happening right now?
If podcasts existed, that would be the True Crime Podcast.
Yeah, it would be.
Where is?
Yes. I mean, he does reveal it is him, you know, after the book comes out. But everybody bought the book because everybody had to know what was going on with Diedrich Knickerbocker.
Yeah. They're like, wait, what is this story?
Hysterical.
I love that. That's
genius.
I was just going to say, very ingenious. And I feel like prolific is too soft of a word to describe his influence. And a lot of the things that I've learned about him just doing this podcast kind of reshape the way you think about New York.
That's true.
People that live in New York, sometimes we get a little bit of a bad taste for New York. Mm-hmm. But if we think about where New York culture came from and how this state became New York State, there's a pride I think New Yorkers have, even when we hate New York, even when we're like, oh, this is the worst. Just me trying to get here, you know, it's always a debacle trying to get from Manhattan to Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. And there's still that thing inside of all of us where we're like, I'm so proud to be from New York. And a lot of that came from people like him who created this culture of New York is like a part of you. Once you are a New Yorker, you're always a New Yorker.
It's true. It's very true.
I think also, and again, this is just my interpretation of a lot of the things that he's written, because I haven't read everything. You know, I'm definitely not speaking as someone who has read every single thing. I'm catching up. But between the history of New York coming out and some of his other stories later on, he seemed to really want to point out to people, like, yes, the Dutch settled here, but look at how much it keeps changing. Things change, you know, and he wound up leaving New York for 17 years. Like, it was a 17-year stretch that he was gone. And when he came back, he even admitted it wasn't the New York he remembered.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like that's something that a lot of people say when they leave New York and they come back after a long time. They're like, this is not the New York I remember. Because it changed. It does. It changes.
and especially during that period of our history,
Yeah.
Everything was changing.
blew up.
Yeah.
Everything was changing. But that was lucky for us because instead of staying in New York, he decided to settle in what is now known as Irvington, named after him, or Sunnyside. His house is named Sunnyside, which allegedly he purchased from the Van Tassels. It was the Van Tassel farm originally.
And it's beautiful.
I love that full circle.
The views from that place are ridiculous.
I want to know how much that would go for now. When you see the view, okay, and I think I have a video of it from when I was walking around the house because you get to walk through his house. You don't get to go upstairs. I'm sure that could be dangerous now at this point, but they have it fully furnished, like set up as if it's being lived in. And he has this beautiful outdoor patio facing the Hudson River. You see the beautiful mountains that I would assume would be the Palisades, I believe.
Yeah.
And it's the most stunning thing I've ever seen. I just want to bring my cup of coffee and a blanket and my book, and I want to sit on that patio.
He's your bestie. Ask him if we can go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I saw it at night.
No.
And it was beautiful.
Do you remember? Okay, the train.
Yeah.
So we're sitting there watching this performance at Sunnyside, and I keep hearing something, and I know there are no cars around where we are because we had to park and then walk down. Yeah. And I'm like looking around and
sound.
And I'm looking at her like, is she hearing this? Is this me? Like, what's happening right now? And then I remembered the train goes right past his home. Like, there are railroad tracks now right behind his home. And I remembered from previous research from wherever, I don't even know where this one came from, but they put that railroad down and he was pissed about it. He actually, I think he sued them because they kept blowing their horn and waking him up. He won $5,000 from that. They got to pay him.
I mean, listen, that sucks. If you spend all this money to be in a very serene, beautiful place,
and then there's just a train.
Then they put a train behind your house.
It's very close. It's very close.
I mean, okay, so I hate that I'm even saying this, but to kind of wrap up.
Yeah.
I know. But to kind of wrap up this story, do you think he knew when he was writing The Legend of Sleepy Hollow what an impact it was going to have on American ghost story culture?
I mean, like, as someone that loves reading books, like, I don't know that authors go into writing books thinking that they're going to be this, like, I can't imagine he went into writing that thinking it would be what it is today.
I agree.
I would say he could have I don't think he thought it was going to be to this degree that 203 years later. And I just want to, as we're wrapping it up, just throw it out there again, being it's Halloween. The Battle of White Plains, which is allegedly where this Hessian soldier lost his head by way of cannonball, was on October 28th, 1776.
I don't think it's a coincidence, friends.
Nope.
Okay. So he is a smart man. Maybe he wasn't so book smart, but he was a very smart man. He could piece together a story. And I think he knew this would be a great Halloween story if I took this battle, right, based on facts, because there was a lot of communication between soldiers, diaries, letters, things like that told of a Hessian losing his head. Someone saw it happen. Didn't mean it's necessarily this person's coming back,
Yeah.
Like, tying up his horse and trying to find a head. And especially since White Plains is, what did we see, like 9 miles away from the old Dutch church where he would have had to have been buried. Like, why would you bring not even decapitated, like his head was blown off,
How would you?
Yeah, so, like, we can debunk that, but I think he was inspired by these amazing folktales and he loved them so much that he wanted some sort of legacy, to leave behind within that realm. And boy, did he do it.
Yeah, he did.
So,
he really did.
If he didn't have anything else to be proud of, I mean, I think he could definitely rest in peace.
That's a beautiful way to end it.
Mm-hmm.
And, to our residents of Folktown, this was so fun. Thank you, everyone, for giving us a chance to share this with you. And I can't wait to do it again. I do just want to tease a little. We do have something a little bit special coming up for you guys soon. We're not going to reveal that here, though.
Yeah, so we might be on a hiatus, gone, but do not forget. We will
This
be
is
back.
just the end.
Yeah, this is
Chapter
just
1.
one. Exactly.
We just wanted to nerd out with you guys for a little bit and have someone to share some spooky, creepy thoughts and stories with.
But we're going to be back.
We will be back. So thank you, residents of Folktown. We will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Happy Halloween!